The evening started like any other busy night at the Grand Hotel. The building stood tall in the middle of the city, glowing with warm lights and decorated with golden banners. People had been talking about the big charity gala for weeks. Expensive. Cars lined up outside, and guests stepped out wearing shining dresses, black suits, and confident smiles. Everyone looked excited, expecting a night full of music, laughter, and luxury. The talk of the night was the famous pianist who was supposed to perform. Many guests had come just to hear him play. The hotel staff had worked all day preparing the ballroom, polishing every surface until it sparkled. The chandelier above the room looked like a giant crystal star, ready to shine on the special performance dot in the middle of all this. A young maid named Lina walked quietly across the hall, holding a tray of glassware. She wasn't dressed in anything fancy. She wore a simple uniform with her hair tied back neatly. Nearly everyone walked past her without even noticing her face. To them, she was just someone who worked in the background, someone who belonged to the corners of the room. But Lina didn't complain. She had learned long ago to stay calm, quiet, and focused on her job. She needed this work. It helped her pay rent, buy food, and send a little money to her family. Life had been tough, and she didn't have the luxury to dream anymore. Her job came first. As she moved through the ballroom, she heard bits of conversations. Guests talked about business deals, expensive vacations, and the famous performer they were waiting for. Some spoke loudly, showing off their status, while others laughed in groups, enjoying the attention. Lina kept her head down, placing glasses on tables, checking every detail. It was part of her routine. But every time she passed the grand piano placed at the center of the stage, her eyes paused for a moment. She didn't stare for long. She couldn't. But the sight of the polished black piano awakened something inside her, something she thought she had buried years ago. There had been a time when music was a big part of her life. A time when she used to sit at a small wooden piano in her childhood home, practicing notes over and over. She remembered how the keys felt under her fingers, how the sound used to calm her heart. For a moment, the memory warmed her, but she quickly shook it off. That was the past. Life had taken her in a different direction. Now she was a maid at a hotel, cleaning rooms, and serving guests. Dreams didn't pay bills. Work did. The ballroom was almost ready. The silverware gleamed. The chairs were lined up perfectly, and soft music played in the background. The hotel manager paced nervously, checking the schedule again and again. Tonight was important for him, too. If the event went well, it could bring more wealthy clients to the hotel. He didn't want a single thing to go wrong. He barked orders to the staff, reminding them to smile, stand straight, and stay alert. Lina listened carefully, nodding when he spoke to her. She didn't mind the pressure. She had worked many difficult shifts before, but tonight felt different, heavier somehow. She couldn't explain why. Maybe it was the crowd. Maybe it was the piano. Or maybe it was the quiet ache inside her chest, reminding her of the life she once wanted. Soon the guests began to take their seats. The chatter grew louder, and flashes of cameras lit up the room. Everyone seemed excited for the performance. Some guests bragged about how many concerts they had attended. Others mentioned how the performer was known around the world. People expected a show that would leave them speechless. Meanwhile, Lina moved around with a tray of drinks, offering them politely. Some guests nodded and thanked her. Others ignored her completely, talking as if she wasn't even there. A few spoke in a tone that felt cold and dismissive, as if her presence bothered them. She kept her smile small and polite. She was used to this. In a place like this, people cared more about status and money than about the people serving them dot at one table. A group of well-dressed guests laughed loudly. One of them pointed toward the stage and said he hoped the performer wouldn't disappoint. "We didn't come here for something ordinary," he joked, making the others laugh. Another bragged that he had heard the pianist play in another country, and that tonight's performance would be unforgettable. Lena placed their drinks gently on the table, trying not to draw attention to herself. She didn't want to get caught in their conversation or become the target of anyone's frustration. She simply nodded and walked away. She passed the piano again, and once more her eyes softened. She wondered for a second how it felt to sit there under the warm lights, playing a piece that touched people's hearts. She imagined pressing the keys, hearing that first note echo through the room. The thought scared her. She hadn't touched a piano in years. She didn't belong on a stage. She belonged behind the scenes, cleaning up after others. That was her reality. Still, she couldn't stop her mind from drifting. She remembered practicing late at night when she was younger, trying to perfect every note. She remembered her old teacher's voice, telling her she had talent. But when life changed, when her family needed money, when responsibilities piled up, music became a luxury she couldn't afford. She quit lessons. She took small jobs. Eventually, she found work at the hotel. And slowly, her dreams faded, becoming nothing more than distant memories. Now she was here, surrounded by wealthy guests, working at an event that celebrated music, while she stood silently at the edges of the room. It felt strange, almost ironic. She sighed softly and returned to her task's dot as more guests arrived. The ballroom filled with energy. The lights grew brighter, and the murmurs turned into loud conversations. Everyone was waiting for the big moment, the entrance of the star performer. The host stepped onto the stage, adjusting the microphone. People leaned forward, eager to hear the announcement. Some guests lifted their phones, ready to record the first glimpse of the pianist. Lina stopped near the side of the room, staying hidden behind a tall decorative plant. From where she stood, she could see the piano clearly. The gloss of the wood reflected the chandelier above it, making it shine like a centerpiece of magic. She wondered who would play it tonight. She wondered how it would sound in this huge room filled with strangers. The host spoke warmly, praising the event, thanking the sponsors, and talking about how honored they were to have the famous performer. People clapped, cheering with excitement. Lena watched quietly, feeling like an invisible observer. She didn't clap, but her heart beat a little faster. Something inside her stirred again. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was longing. Or maybe it was the simple desire to feel seen. Just once, not as a maid, but as a person. A waiter walked past her, whispering that after the performance there would be dinner service, and they needed to be quick and coordinated. Lena nodded, returning her focus to work. She reminded herself that she was here to do her job, not to think about music or dreams. But no matter how much she tried to push the thought away, her mind kept drifting back to the piano. As she continued. Moving around the ballroom, she felt a mix of emotions: tiredness from long hours, nervousness from the crowd, and a quiet sadness that she couldn't explain. She looked at the guests laughing, smiling, and living their best lives. She wondered what it felt like to have that kind of freedom, that kind of confidence. She wondered what her life would have been if things had turned out differently. But she quickly shook her head, reminding herself that thinking about what-ifs wouldn't change anything. The minutes passed, and the anticipation in the room grew stronger. People leaned in, whispering about the performance. Some guests tapped their feet impatiently. The hotel staff stood ready along the walls, waiting for instructions. The moment was close. Everything was set for a night that everyone expected to be flawless. Lena walked toward the back of the room, preparing to help with the next task. But before she took another step, she paused and turned her head slightly. Her eyes fell on the piano once more. It felt like it was calling her, reminding her of who she once was. She took a small breath, feeling her chest tighten. She didn't know why the sight of the piano affected her so deeply tonight. Maybe it was because she hadn't seen one up close in so long. Maybe because she missed music more than she admitted. She looked away quickly and continued walking, forcing herself to focus on her duties. She didn't realize that this night, this room, this crowd, this piano would soon change everything in her life. For now, she was just another maid, working silently in the background, unaware that fate was slowly moving her toward a moment she never expected. And as the lights dimmed slightly and the room fell into an expectant hush, Lena stood quietly along the wall, waiting like everyone else for the night to begin, not knowing that her own story was about to unfold in a way she could never have imagined. The room buzzed with excitement as the audience waited for the performance to begin. The soft chatter of conversation mixed with the clinking of glasses, creating a warm, lively atmosphere. Everyone seemed full of anticipation, their eyes occasionally flicking toward the grand piano in the center of the stage. The hotel manager stood near the side, checking his watch repeatedly. He had rehearsed every detail of the evening, yet an uneasy feeling gnawed at him. Something felt off, though he couldn't put his finger on it. Suddenly, a phone rang backstage. The manager hurried to answer it, and a tense conversation followed. Lena, carrying a tray of champagne glasses, noticed his expression change as he listened. His face tightened, and his voice, though low, carried urgency. "What do you mean the flight is canceled?" "Are you sure?" he said, pacing back and forth. He hung up, his hands trembling slightly. A cold wave of worry washed over him. The star pianist, the reason people had come tonight, would not be able to perform. Word spread quickly among the staff. The head waiter whispered to Lena, his voice tight with concern. "The performer won't make it. He's stuck at the airport. The guests, they'll be furious." Lena's stomach dropped. She paused mid-step, unsure what to do next. She had no training for this kind of chaos, no experience handling high-profile guests' anger. All she could do was continue moving quietly, keeping the glasses balanced in her hands. The manager stepped onto the stage, addressing the audience with a strained smile. "Ladies and gentlemen, I regret to inform you that our main performer has experienced an unexpected delay. We apologize for the inconvenience." The room murmured in confusion. Some guests frowned, others whispered to one another, and a few rolled their eyes, visibly annoyed. Lena felt a pang of sympathy, even for the frustrated guests. She knew they had expectations, and now those expectations might never be met. A few bold voices started laughing, though not in a friendly way. One guest scoffed. "What is this? A hotel event falling apart?" Another joined in, pointing at the staff. Maybe the maid should play instead. They laughed cruelly, clearly enjoying their own joke. Lena froze for a moment, gripping her tray tighter. Their words were sharp, cutting, and filled with ridicule. She wanted to disappear, to melt into the background and vanish completely. The laughter spread, louder now, and Lena could feel the eyes of the guests on her, though many were hidden behind polite smiles or feigned indifference. She carried on as best she could, placing glasses on tables and walking swiftly away from the center of attention. Yet the words echoed in her mind, replaying with each step. The maid should play. The thought stung, but it also stirred something deep within her. She paused near the piano once more, her hands trembling slightly. It was a magnificent instrument, black and glossy, reflecting the chandeliers above. She ran her fingers along its smooth edge and remembered the countless hours she had spent with her own old piano years ago. Her heart beat faster, memories of past practice sessions, recitals, and lessons flooding back. She had once been proud of her skill, yet now she had convinced herself that those days were gone. Music had become a memory, a luxury she could not afford to pursue. Backstage, the hotel staff whispered among themselves. Some suggested canceling the event entirely, while others argued that the audience would not forgive them. The manager grew frantic, running from one side to the other, trying to find a solution. It was in this moment of chaos that someone jokingly gestured toward Lena. "Why don't we just have her play? She's here, and she knows music, right?" The words were meant as a joke, a way to lighten the tension, but the suggestion lingered in the air. Lena froze where she stood, her mind racing. She had not intended to be noticed, and certainly not like this. But now, all eyes were on her, even if only indirectly. She wanted to shrink back, to say nothing, but a tiny spark of curiosity flickered. Could she actually do it? Could she play, even for just a few minutes, and fill the silence? Her fingers itched to touch the keys, to hear the music again. But fear gripped her heart. What if she failed? What if everyone laughed at her, not for joking this time, but in reality? The guests grew impatient, whispers and small complaints echoing throughout the room. One woman in a sparkling gown huffed, "How unprofessional. We came to see a real performance." Another man muttered, "This is ridiculous. We should leave." The tension was rising, and the staff struggled to maintain calm. Lena's chest tightened as she watched the manager run his hands through his hair, visibly panicked. Finally, the manager approached her, his face pale and anxious. I know this is sudden, but would you perhaps play the piano? Just a few notes? We need something, anything, to calm the audience." Lena blinked, startled. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. She had never imagined that such a moment would come. She had never expected anyone to ask her, the quiet maid, to step forward in a room filled with strangers, filled with wealthy, important people. The guests had begun to notice the interaction. A few leaned forward in curiosity, while others laughed, thinking it was part of the joke. "See? The maid is going to perform," someone whispered, and the room erupted in quiet chuckles. Lena felt heat rise to her face. She wanted to run, to disappear, to pretend she hadn't heard. But she could not move. Her feet were rooted to the ground. The piano, so close now, seemed to call to her, a silent voice reminding her of what she could do, what she had always loved to do. A few staff members exchanged worried glances, unsure if this was a good idea. But with the main performer gone, they had no other option. Lena took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. She had to decide in this moment whether to step forward or remain invisible forever. Her hands were clammy, and her stomach churned. But somewhere deep inside, a small voice whispered that maybe this was her chance, not just to play music, but to reclaim a piece of herself she had lost long ago. With trembling steps, Lena approached the piano. The guests watched silently, some amused, some curious. A few still whispered, some pointing, others shaking their heads in disbelief. She's just a maid. How good could she possibly be? The skepticism in their eyes was sharp, almost cruel. But Lena ignored it, focusing instead on the familiar feel of the keys under her fingers. She paused for a moment, sitting down on the polished bench. Her heart raced. She could hear the murmurs fading slightly as the audience noticed her presence. The manager gave a small nod, a silent gesture of encouragement. Lena closed her eyes for a brief second, remembering the long hours she had spent practicing, the times she had imagined performing for a crowd, the times she had felt music fill her soul, even when no one else was listening. When she opened her eyes, the room was quiet. All eyes were on her now, and the laughter had died down into curious silence. She took another deep breath and let her hands hover over the keys, feeling the smooth surface beneath her fingers. A sense of calm began to replace her fear, a quiet confidence building slowly. This was her world, even if just for a few moments. As she prepared to play, Lena felt something she hadn't felt in years, a connection to music that was pure and unbroken. She remembered how each note could tell a story, how a melody could express feelings words never could. The room held its collective breath, unaware that the quiet maid sitting at the piano was about to change everything. At that moment, Lena realized that this was no longer about the audience, no longer about the guests, no longer about expectations. It was about her reclaiming her voice, her talent, and her dignity. The piano waited silently, ready to sing, and Lena, the maid who had been overlooked, underestimated, and dismissed, was about to step into the spotlight in a way no one could have imagined. Outside the hall, the city lights flickered against the night sky. Inside, the guests shifted in their seats, some whispering nervously, others still doubtful. No one knew what would happen next. The main performer was gone. The room was tense with anticipation. And at the center of it all, Lena's fingers hovered over the keys, poised to create a sound that would silence every doubt, every laugh, and every mocking word in the room. She drew a slow, steadying breath. The moment had come. The first note was about to be played. And for Lena, everything that passed, the lost years, the hidden talent, and the quiet longing was about to converge in a single unforgettable instant. The room waited. The air was thick with expectation. Lena's hands descended gently on the keys, and the first soft note echoed through the hall, delicate and clear. The sound was unlike anything the audience had expected. The laughter that had filled the room moments ago was gone. A hushed silence replaced it, a mixture of surprise and disbelief. Lena's playing began to flow naturally, each note connecting with the next, creating a melody that felt alive. Guests leaned forward in their seats, some opening their mouths in astonishment, unable to speak. The music filled the space, wrapping around each person like a gentle embrace. Lena's fingers moved gracefully, the piano singing under her touch. The once dismissive audience felt themselves drawn in, their earlier mockery replaced by a quiet awe they couldn't explain. For Lena, the world narrowed to just her and the piano. She didn't see the wealth, the status, or the judgment. She saw only the music, only the connection she had missed for so long. With each note, she reclaimed a part of herself she thought was gone forever, and the piano's first notes echoed through the grand hall, soft and tentative at first, almost as if testing the air. Lena's fingers hovered delicately above the keys, feeling the smooth surface, the cool touch beneath her palms. She could hear her own heartbeat, steadying as she took a deep breath. Each movement felt natural, like returning to a world she had once known intimately. The soft hum of the piano began to grow, notes blending into a simple melody that pulled at the edges of the room, demanding attention. The audience, initially skeptical and impatient, grew quiet. The laughter had stopped, replaced by a subtle, tense curiosity. People leaned slightly forward, their eyes fixed on the maid at the piano. Some furrowed their brows, unsure whether this could actually be a performance. Others whispered to their neighbors, disbelief coloring their words. "Can she really play like that?" One guest murmured, almost afraid to speak louder. Another shook their heads slowly, muttering, "I didn't expect this from her." Lena closed her eyes briefly, letting the music guide her. Memories of long, lonely hours at a tiny piano in her childhood home came flooding back. She remembered the careful repetition of scales, the small victories when a difficult piece finally came together, and the quiet pride when someone, anyone, listened and smiled at her playing. It had been a long time since she felt that sense of accomplishment. Now, as the notes poured from her fingers, she felt alive in a way she hadn't for years. Her fingers moved with precision and grace, creating a melody that was both tender and strong. Each note carried emotion, rising and falling like gentle waves, drawing the audience in. The hall, once filled with chatter and laughter, was now completely silent. Even the waiters paused, glasses in hand, mesmerized. The chandeliers overhead seemed to shine a little brighter, reflecting the intensity of the moment. Lena had become the center of the room without meaning to, not because she wanted attention, but because her talent demanded it. A few guests tried to whisper, perhaps to convince themselves that this was just a lucky coincidence, but the music drowned out every word. Lena's touch on the keys was confident now, the hesitation she had felt when first sitting down disappearing as the melody grew richer. She began to play a slightly faster passage, one that required agility and accuracy. Her fingers danced effortlessly, producing notes that seemed almost impossible for someone who had been out of formal practice for years. The reactions in the room were immediate. Eyes widened. Mouths fell open. Some guests clutched their napkins, unsure whether to cry or clap. The melody she played carried not just skill, but emotion, a story embedded in every chord. It told of loss, longing, and resilience. It spoke to something universal, touching the hearts of everyone present. Even those who had been mocking her just moments ago were now transfixed. Unable to look away, from her vantage point at the piano, Lena sensed the change. The room's energy shifted. The initial laughter and ridicule had been replaced by awe and respect. She could feel the weight of expectation lifting from her shoulders, replaced by a quiet sense of purpose. Every note reinforced a part of herself she had long thought lost, a reminder that her talent was real and that it mattered. A tall man in the front row, previously scoffing and leaning back in his chair, now sat forward, his expression one of disbelief. He whispered to the person next to him, "I never thought." "She's incredible." A woman nearby wiped a tear from her cheek, clearly moved by the emotion in the music. Even the hotel manager, standing at the side of the stage, looked stunned. He hadn't expected this from a maid, someone he had barely noticed before. Now, he realized that Lena's presence and skill had transformed the entire atmosphere of the gala. Lena didn't rush. She let the music breathe, pausing slightly between phrases, allowing the room to feel every chord. Her hands moved fluidly, as if the piano and she were one entity, connected in a seamless dance of sound. She had always loved the piano, not for applause or recognition, but for the way it allowed her to express the deepest parts of herself. Tonight, she played not for the audience, but for herself, for the girl she had once been, and for the years that had passed without music in her life. The melody began to swell, filling every corner of the room. Guests who had been skeptical now leaned in closer, completely absorbed. Conversations had stopped, glasses had been set down, and even the clatter of silverware in the kitchen seemed to fade into nothingness. The music commanded attention, demanding focus, respect, and silence. It was as if the hall itself had shifted to honor the performance dot as Lena continued. Her fingers moved with increasing confidence. She transitioned into a section that required speed and precision, executing each passage flawlessly. The notes rang out clear and bright, resonating throughout the room. A few audience members gasped softly, impressed by the technical skill on display. It was more than just talent. It was mastery, a control over the instrument that only years of practice and dedication could bring. She glanced briefly at the audience, seeing their reactions mirrored on each face. There was amazement, disbelief, and admiration. The same people who had laughed at her were now captivated, their earlier mockery replaced by respect. Lena felt a mix of emotions: her self-pride, relief, and a quiet joy that she hadn't felt in a long time. The piano no longer felt like a distant memory. It was a living, breathing part of her again. The manager watched in astonishment. He had expected a polite gesture, maybe a few notes, something to fill time until a solution could be found. Instead, he witnessed a full, heartfelt performance that captivated the entire audience. He stepped back, unsure whether to intervene or simply let the music continue. He realized that this was bigger than the gala itself. It was a moment of transformation, not just for Lina, but for everyone in the room. Lina's melody began to slow slightly, transitioning into a softer, more introspective section. The notes were delicate and vulnerable, carrying the weight of unspoken emotions. She could feel the audience leaning in, sensing the depth of feeling in every chord. It was a part of herself she had kept hidden, a vulnerability she had rarely shared. And now, in this unexpected moment, it poured out freely. Some guests closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them. Others held hands with their companions, moved by the sincerity and emotion conveyed through the piano. Lina didn't play for applause or recognition. She played to reclaim a part of her soul that had been buried beneath years of work and hardship. Each note was a step toward freedom, a reminder that talent and passion could not be suppressed forever. As the piece progressed, Lina allowed herself a small smile. She felt alive in a way she hadn't in years. The piano had always been her refuge, a place where she could be herself completely, without fear or judgment. Tonight, it became a bridge between her hidden world and the audience, a way to connect with people who had underestimated her at first glance. The audience sat in rapt attention, completely absorbed. The room had shifted from expectation to awe. The music was no longer background entertainment. It was the heartbeat of the evening, commanding respect and admiration. Lina's fingers moved effortlessly, the rhythm and melody blending into a seamless flow that left the audience spellbound. A young man near the back whispered to his friend, "I didn't believe it at first, but she's amazing." Another guest nodded, eyes wide. "I've never heard anything like this." Even those who had been cynical or dismissive before now watched silently, fully aware that they were witnessing something rare and extraordinary. Lina didn't notice the cameras flashing or the phones recording. She was completely absorbed in the music, in the conversation between her heart and the piano. Every note told a story, every pause carried meaning. She felt connected to the audience, even without words, even without looking directly at them. The music itself was enough to communicate what her voice could not. As the final section approached, Lina's playing became more powerful, more confident. The notes rang with clarity, carrying strength and emotion in equal measure. The audience held their breath, sensing the climax of the performance. The room was silent except for the piano, each key resonating with precision and feeling. When the last note lingered and faded into the air, a moment of absolute stillness followed. Lina's hands rested gently on the keys, her chest rising and falling with deep breaths. The audience sat frozen, as if trying to comprehend what they had just heard. Then slowly, a ripple of applause began, tentative at first, and then growing into a wave of admiration. People stood, clapping, cheering, and some even whistling softly. Lina's eyes opened, and she allowed herself a brief glance at the crowd. The same faces that had mocked her just minutes ago now reflected astonishment and respect. Some guests approached her cautiously, unsure how to express their admiration without seeming awkward. Others simply watched, silent but clearly impressed. Lina remained seated for a moment, letting the applause wash over her, feeling a quiet pride swell inside. She had done more than play the piano. She had silenced doubt, transformed skepticism into awe, and reminded herself of the power she still carried within. The hotel manager, standing at the side, finally allowed himself a small smile. He had witnessed something extraordinary, something that no plan, no schedule, and no expectation could have prepared him for. He nodded to Lina, silently acknowledging. The room remained quiet for a moment after Lena's last note faded into the air. For a brief, almost magical second, it felt like time had stopped. The guests, still seated, were frozen in a mixture of disbelief and admiration. They had come expecting a famous pianist, someone they had read about in magazines, someone they thought would impress them with grandeur. Instead, they had been silenced, moved, and completely captivated by a young maid they had dismissed just minutes before. Lena slowly rose from the piano bench, her hands brushing over the polished black surface one last time. She felt a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. Her heart pounded, her fingers tingled, and yet a calm satisfaction spread through her chest. She had done something she never imagined she could do, not just play beautifully, but command a room, capture hearts, and change the atmosphere completely. For a fleeting moment, she allowed herself to smile. A small, quiet smile, acknowledging the power of what she had just accomplished. The audience began to stir, first tentatively, then with growing energy. Applause erupted, filling the grand hall with a thunderous sound. People stood from their seats, clapping with genuine admiration. Some cheered, some whistled softly, others wiped tears from their eyes. The transformation in the room was extraordinary. What had started as a night of expectation, laughter, and mockery had shifted into something profound, almost sacred. Lena's performance had become the heart of the evening. The hotel manager stepped forward, his face a mix of awe and relief. He had been panicking backstage, trying to find a solution, and now he was witnessing a scene he could never have planned for. He clapped vigorously, almost shouting over the crowd. "Incredible! Absolutely incredible!" he exclaimed. Guests around him nodded, some still murmuring in astonishment, others openly expressing admiration. Lena remained near the piano, allowing the applause to wash over her without moving too quickly. She needed a moment to process everything that was happening. Some of the wealthiest and most influential guests approached her, their expressions a mix of surprise, respect, and curiosity. One woman in a shimmering gown said softly, I didn't expect that. You are truly remarkable." Another man, a little older, shook his head in amazement. "I've heard the greatest pianists in the world, and yet, that was something else entirely." Lena felt a warmth spreading through her chest. She had not played for praise, yet the recognition, so genuine and heartfelt, touched her deeply. Even those who had laughed at her earlier looked different now. Their faces showed embarrassment, disbelief, and slowly, respect. A few whispered to one another, clearly reconsidering their first impressions. "I can't believe it." "She's just a maid," one said quietly. Another nodded, saying, "We underestimated her completely." The shift in perception was palpable. Lena had turned the tables in a single performance, and the room felt electric with the energy of transformation doubt as she collected herself. Lena noticed that some of the staff had gathered near the edges of the room. They watched in awe, quietly admiring her skill. For them, this was more than a performance. It was a revelation. The quiet, diligent maid who spent long hours cleaning and serving had just displayed a talent they never imagined she possessed. Their respect for her grew instantly. They had seen her working tirelessly every day, and now they saw the depth of her hidden ability, the kind of brilliance that cannot be taught, but only nurtured. Lena felt a small pang of humility. She had worked hard to develop her skill, but she had always believed her talent was meant for someone else, for another place, another life. She had resigned herself to a world where her music stayed locked inside her, private and unnoticed. And now, in a single evening, that world had shifted. People had heard her, felt her, and recognized her talent in a way she had never imagined possible. The room slowly began to buzz with conversation again, but this time it was different. There were no mocking tones, no jokes at her expense. Instead, People spoke quietly, reverently, discussing the beauty of her music, the emotion she had conveyed, and the sheer mastery of her technique. Some compared it to performances by world-renowned artists, admitting that Lina had outshone even the best they had seen. The energy in the room was now one of admiration, respect, and awe. The piano, once a silent fixture at the center of the stage, had become a bridge. Through her music, Lina had connected with each person present. Her performance had reminded them of the power of dedication, the beauty of hidden talent, and the value of seeing people for who they truly are, rather than judging them by appearance or status. Every note she had played carried meaning. Every chord told a story, and the audience had listened, moved, and transformed along with her. Lina stood quietly, allowing herself a moment to breathe and absorb the scene. She noticed the expressions of those who had been skeptical. A young man in the front row looked awestruck, his eyes wide, clearly stunned by the depth of her skill. A woman near the center dabbed at her eyes, tears glistening, as if the music had touched a place inside her she hadn't realized existed. Even the children attending the gala seemed captivated, their faces glowing with wonder. The applause began to fade slightly, but a low murmur of admiration continued to ripple through the hall. Lina realized that her music had done more than entertain. It had moved people in a way that transcended the expectations of the night. She had taken a moment of potential embarrassment, a sudden crisis, and transformed it into a display of beauty, talent, and human connection. The audience's laughter and ridicule had been replaced entirely by respect. Leaving the room humming with energy. The manager approached her again, this time with a sincere smile. "You've done something incredible tonight," he said quietly. "I don't know what to say. The audience is speechless." Lina shook her head softly, still processing. She didn't need accolades or praise. The feeling of reclaiming her skill, of expressing herself fully after years of suppression, was reward enough. Yet, hearing others recognize her talent, especially in such a public and unexpected way, brought a warmth she had not anticipated. Some of the guests began to ask questions, wanting to know more about Lina's background. They were genuinely curious about how someone who worked as a maid could possess such skill. Lina hesitated, unsure how much to reveal, but the curiosity in their eyes encouraged her to share. She spoke quietly, telling them about her childhood, the piano lessons she had taken, and the circumstances that had forced her to give up formal training. Her words were simple but heartfelt, painting a picture of perseverance, sacrifice, and hidden potential. As she spoke, the audience listened attentively. The story of her life, combined with the performance they had just witnessed, created a powerful impact. People began to reflect on their own assumptions and judgments. They realized how easily they had underestimated someone based on their appearance, role, or social standing. Lina's story became more than a performance. It became a lesson in humility, respect, and the recognition of true talent wherever it may be found. The applause returned, this time softer but more meaningful, filled with understanding and appreciation rather than shock or surprise. Lina allowed herself a small bow, acknowledging the audience without seeking validation. She had shared a part of herself, and that alone felt enough. The hall was no longer just a space for a gala. It had become a place of connection, transformation, and reflection. All because one quiet maid had stepped forward when the world least expected it. As the evening continued, Lina moved among the guests briefly, answering questions and smiling politely. People approached her with genuine warmth, offering congratulations, praise, and admiration. Some even asked if she had ever considered performing professionally, recognizing that her talent was exceptional. Lina responded humbly, unsure of what the future held, but feeling a sense of possibility she hadn't felt in years. The staff, once anxious and tense, now watched her with pride. They had witnessed something extraordinary, a young maid rising above expectations, revealing a hidden brilliance and transforming an entire room. Lena had reminded everyone that talent, dedication, and courage are not confined by circumstance. She had shown them that greatness can come from the most unexpected places, and that respect is something earned through skill and heart, not position or status. The night continued with a new energy. Guests were inspired, conversations shifted to admiration and reflection, and the atmosphere was filled with a sense of possibility. Lena, while quietly returning to her duties, carried with her a newfound confidence. She had faced a moment of fear, uncertainty, and ridicule, and had emerged not only unscathed, but celebrated for her true self. The experience lingered in everyone's minds. A memory of the timid maid stepping forward to play the piano, and the transformation that followed, would not soon fade. Lena had not only captivated an audience, but had also shifted perspectives, leaving a lasting impression on all who witnessed her. For her, this night marked more than a performance. It was a reclaiming of identity, a reminder of hidden strength, and a proof that talent and courage, when embraced, can defy every expectation. As she looked around the hall one last time before returning to her duties, Lena felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The room had been silenced by her music, but it had been awakened in spirit. She had taken control of a moment at sea. The applause continued to echo through the grand ballroom, filling every corner with energy and admiration. Lena had stepped away from the piano, but the room still felt alive with the echoes of her music. Guests remained in their seats, some still trying to catch their breath, others quietly whispering to each other about the extraordinary performance they had just witnessed. What had begun as a night of anticipation and mockery had transformed into a night of awe, respect, and revelation. The hotel manager, who had been frantically pacing earlier, now stood frozen in amazement. He had seen many events, hosted countless galas, and managed performances by some of the world's finest musicians, but nothing had prepared him for this. A quiet maid, who had moved among them unnoticed all evening, had just delivered a performance that rivaled the best they had ever seen. He felt a mix of pride, relief, and humility. Pride that his hotel had witnessed such talent, relief that the crisis had been turned into triumph, and humility because he realized how easily he had underestimated someone simply because of her role. Guests began to rise from their chairs, some approaching Lena hesitantly, unsure of how to address her. Many were still overwhelmed by what they had seen. Their eyes held a mixture of astonishment and admiration. A few wealthy patrons, who had only attended the gala for networking and socializing, found themselves reflecting on the deeper meaning of the evening. They realized that talent and brilliance are often hidden in plain sight, waiting for the right moment to shine. One older gentleman, well-dressed and distinguished, approached Lena with a gentle smile. "I must admit," he said softly, "I have heard many performers, some famous worldwide, and yet tonight you have moved me more than anyone else. Your music carries not only skill, but feeling, depth, and soul. Thank you for sharing it with us." Lena's eyes widened slightly, a soft warmth spreading through her chest. She nodded politely, unable to find words at first. Her hands still trembled slightly from the adrenaline and intensity of the performance. She had played for herself, not for recognition, yet the acknowledgement of her talent touched her deeply. A young woman near the front, holding a notebook and pen, stepped forward hesitantly. "I'm a music student," she said, her voice quiet but earnest. "I just wanted to tell you, your technique, your control, your expression, it's remarkable. I've never seen someone convey so much emotion and precision at the same time. May I ask, have you performed professionally before?" Lena shook her head softly, a small smile on her lips. "No," she said. "I learned when I was younger, but life took me in a different direction. I never imagined performing in front of so many people. Not like this." The young woman's eyes widened. "Then you are truly extraordinary. I hope you will consider pursuing this path further. The world should hear your music." Lena felt a mixture of humility and hope. She had never thought that such words would be spoken to her. She had resigned herself to a life where music existed only in private, in fleeting moments of practice or memory. And now, here it was, being acknowledged, appreciated, and celebrated in ways she could scarcely imagine. The other guests began to approach as well. Some offered kind words and congratulations. Others asked questions, curious about her background and training. Lena spoke simply, sharing her story without embellishment. She told them about her childhood, her early lessons, the dedication she had poured into practice, and the circumstances that had led her to work as a maid. Her voice was quiet but steady, and as she spoke, the audience listened with genuine interest, absorbing not just her words, but the strength and resilience behind them. The initial laughter and ridicule that had greeted her earlier now felt like a distant memory. Lena could see it reflected in the faces of those who had mocked her, replaced with admiration and a quiet sense of embarrassment. They had underestimated her, judged her based on her uniform and role, and now they were faced with the undeniable proof of her talent. Some avoided eye contact, perhaps ashamed, while others nodded respectfully, acknowledging that they had been wrong to doubt her. The hotel staff, who had watched the performance unfold from the sidelines, now approached Lena with quiet pride. They had always known she was skilled, having glimpsed her passion for music in fleeting moments during breaks and quiet hours. But witnessing her perform in front of an audience of influential and discerning guests was something entirely different. Their respect for her deepened, not only because of her talent, but because of her courage and composure under pressure. As the evening progressed, Lena moved gracefully among the guests, answering questions and accepting compliments with humility. She did not seek the spotlight or demand recognition. She simply shared her story and allowed her music to speak for itself. The effect was profound. Guests who had arrived expecting mere entertainment found themselves reflecting on resilience, hidden potential, and the transformative power of courage. Lena's performance had become more than a display of technical skill. It had become a lesson in character and perseverance. A few guests, intrigued by the depth of her playing, asked her to demonstrate a few more pieces. Lena hesitated briefly, feeling the weight of the attention, but then nodded. She returned to the piano, sitting carefully on the polished bench. The hall fell silent once again, every eye fixed on her. She began to play softly, her fingers moving with confidence and grace. The melody was gentle at first, then grew richer, more expressive. With each note, she drew the audience further into her world, telling stories without words, evoking emotions both subtle and powerful. The crowd responded with quiet reverence. Even those who had arrived with skepticism now listened intently, captivated by the depth of her expression. Lena's music carried the echoes of her life, the challenges she had faced, the sacrifices she had made, and the dreams she had never abandoned. It was as though she was speaking to them through the piano, sharing a part of herself that had long been hidden. As she played, Lena became aware of the effect she was having on the audience. People leaned forward, tears glistened in some eyes, and soft whispers of admiration rippled through the hall. The room had transformed completely. Where there had once been doubt, mockery, and impatience, there was now silence filled with awe, understanding, and deep respect. Her music had bridged the gap between social status and personal talent, reminding everyone that true brilliance is often hidden in the most unexpected places. The manager watched closely, amazed at how seamlessly Lena had captured the attention of the room. He had feared a disaster when the main performer canceled, but instead, He had witnessed a moment of extraordinary grace and skill. He realized that the evening had been saved, not by the guest of honor, not by careful planning or preparation, but by the courage and hidden talent of someone he had overlooked. Lina finished the piece, letting the final note linger in the air. The audience remained silent for a heartbeat, absorbing the last echoes before bursting into applause once more. The sound was deafening, heartfelt, and unreserved. People rose from their seats, clapping, cheering, and some even whistling softly. The energy in the room was electric, a collective recognition of the rare and extraordinary talent they had just witnessed. Guests approached Lina again, some eager to ask more questions, others simply wanting to express their admiration. A few offered to help her pursue professional opportunities, recognizing that her talent was too remarkable to remain hidden. Lina smiled politely, feeling a quiet sense of possibility. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to imagine a future where music could be more than a private passion, where her skill could be shared, appreciated, and even nurtured further. The evening continued, but the atmosphere had shifted completely. What had started as a potentially disastrous night had become a celebration of talent, courage, and human resilience. Lina moved among the guests with grace, answering questions, sharing stories, and allowing her presence to be felt in a way that went beyond her role as a maid. She had transformed perceptions, not through words alone, but through her music and the quiet strength it revealed. Even the children attending the gala were captivated. They watched Lina with wide eyes, fascinated by her skill and the way she seemed to command the piano effortlessly. Some whispered excitedly to their parents, asking how someone who worked as a maid could play so beautifully. The parents smiled, perhaps reflecting on their own assumptions, and the lesson being imparted to the next generation, that talent and potential are not limited by circumstance, status, or appearance. The applause eventually settled into murmurs of admiration and conversation. Guests discussed her playing, her story, and the courage it had taken to step forward. Many admitted privately that they had been wrong to underestimate her. Lina, standing quietly at the side of the room, observed this transformation with a sense of calm satisfaction. She had not sought to prove anyone wrong, yet she had done so effortlessly through her music. The hotel staff approached her again, offering congratulations and praise. Some quietly admitted that they had suspected she had talent, but witnessing it fully in the spotlight was something entirely different. Lina acknowledged their words with quiet humility, grateful for their support, yet she remained focused on the music itself, the thing that had carried her through years of hardship. And the night after the talent event, the community center was quiet, the echoes of applause and whispers still lingering in the minds of those who had been present. Lily returned early, not because she wanted attention or praise, but because the piano had called her back, as it always had. The air smelled faintly of the polished wood of the floor, and the lingering scent of the evening's candles and decorations. She approached the instrument slowly, her fingers lightly brushing the keys, remembering every note, every chord, every expression of the previous night. Ryan arrived shortly after, his footsteps hesitant. He had spent the night replaying the events in his mind, unable to shake the memory of Lily's performance. He had expected to be the star, to receive the applause, the admiration, the attention. Instead, he had been left humbled, stunned, and quietly awed. There was a shift in him now, a recognition that his assumptions had been wrong, and that the quiet, unassuming woman he had teased held a skill and depth he could not ignore. "Good morning," he said softly, careful not to break the calm in the room. He didn't attempt his usual confident swagger, didn't try to boast or assert himself. His eyes held a sincerity he had rarely displayed before. Lily looked up briefly, giving a small nod in acknowledgement. She did not speak at first, letting the quietness of the moment linger. The piano before her was familiar, almost like an old friend. and the notes waiting beneath her fingers seemed to hum in anticipation of what was to come. Ryan stepped closer, standing slightly to the side. I wanted to say thank you," he began hesitantly. "Not just for the performance, but for showing me something I didn't understand. I underestimated you, and I'm sorry." Lily smiled faintly, a small warmth in her expression. "It's all right," she said simply. "People often judge what they don't understand. The important thing is to learn from it." He nodded, and for a moment neither spoke. The silence was comfortable, filled with the unspoken understanding that something significant had shifted between them. The teasing, the assumptions, the need to assert superiority, all of that had melted away, replaced by quiet respect. Then Lily spoke again, softly, her voice calm but firm. "You saw last night what music can do. It's not about showing off or being the loudest. It's about honesty, dedication, and feeling. You can play flashy notes, but if there's no heart behind them, it doesn't mean anything." Ryan listened, absorbing every word. He felt a humility he had not known before, a recognition that talent without respect, skill without purpose, and performance without meaning were empty. Lily's words carried weight, not because they were meant to scold, but because they came from experience, from truth, and from a deep understanding of what it meant to dedicate oneself fully to something. The day went on quietly. Lily practiced, letting her fingers glide over the keys, exploring melodies, experimenting with emotions, and testing her memory of the pieces she had played. Ryan stayed nearby, occasionally attempting a few notes, but never disrupting her, never boasting. He had learned that this was not about competition. It was about something deeper, something lasting. Later in the morning, a few staff members approached. They had been curious about Lily's background, wanting to understand how she had developed such remarkable skill in relative secrecy. Lily shared lightly, telling them about the years she had spent practicing quietly, the lessons she had taken in her youth, and the dedication she had poured into music despite never seeking recognition. Her story was simple, honest, and filled with a quiet humility that only made her performance the night, before even more impressive word began to spread subtly among the community. People who had been present at the talent night shared their astonishment with neighbors, friends, and family. They described the quiet woman who had transformed a simple piano piece into an unforgettable performance, the one who had started with a single note and captured the attention of everyone in the room. People were intrigued, amazed, and inspired. Lily's talent became a quiet legend in the small community, not through boasting or exaggeration, but through the undeniable truth of what they had witnessed. Ryan, meanwhile, continued to reflect. He watched her play, noting how naturally the music flowed, how every gesture and note carried meaning. He realized that his own confidence had been built on assumptions and the desire for attention, not on genuine mastery. In contrast, Lily's quiet dedication had produced something lasting, something that moved people and commanded respect without demanding it. He finally spoke again, quietly, almost reluctantly. Would you teach me?" he asked. "I want to understand, really understand. Not just play notes, but feel them, like you do." Lily paused, surprised, but not offended. She considered his words, sensing the sincerity beneath them. After a moment, she nodded. "If you're willing to work and listen, yes. Music is more than just notes. It's about learning patience, feeling, and understanding. If you're ready for that, I can help." Ryan nodded eagerly, grateful for the opportunity and humbled by the chance to learn from someone he had once mocked. The dynamic between them had shifted completely. No longer was it about teasing or one-upmanship. It was about learning, growth, and the sharing of knowledge. Over the following days, Lily and Ryan spent quiet hours at the piano together. She guided him through exercises, teaching him not just technique, but the importance of expression, timing, and emotion. He struggled at first, his fingers clumsy, his approach mechanical. But she was patient, correcting gently, encouraging him to listen to the music, to understand its heartbeat, and to connect with the piano in a meaningful way. As the lessons progressed, Ryan began to change. He was no longer the brash, attention-seeking performer he had been. He listened more, observed more, and gradually learned to approach music with humility and care. Lily's influence went beyond technique. She had taught him about respect, patience, and the quiet power of dedication. He realized that skill without heart was empty, and that true mastery required both talent and understanding. Meanwhile, Lily continued to grow as well. Performing for the audience had rekindled a passion she had once feared lost. She explored new pieces, experimented with compositions, and began to share her music more openly with others. Her confidence grew, not through ego, but through the simple knowledge that her dedication and skill had value and impact. She became a quiet inspiration for others in the community, showing that persistence, patience, and love for one's craft could create moments of awe and beauty. The community center began to recognize her in small ways. They invited her to lead workshops for children, offering lessons on piano and music appreciation. People who had doubted her abilities now sought her guidance, eager to learn from someone who had proven that talent and dedication could transform expectations. Lily accepted these opportunities quietly, focused on sharing knowledge rather than seeking praise. She found joy in seeing others discover the same spark of passion that had always lived within her. Ryan, too, became a more thoughtful presence. He continued learning from Lily, now with a genuine appreciation for her skill and patience. He practiced diligently, not for applause, but for understanding. Over time, his own approach to music shifted, moving from flashy performance to thoughtful expression. He discovered a new respect for dedication and for the quiet influence of someone who had once been underestimated. The months that followed were filled with growth, learning, and quiet accomplishment. Lily's talent continued to shine, but she never sought to dominate or overshadow others. She had learned the value of humility, patience, and focus, and she shared that wisdom naturally. Ryan learned alongside her, grateful for the lessons and for the chance to grow under her guidance. The memory of the talent night lingered as a pivotal moment. It had begun with expectation, curiosity, and a hint of doubt, but it ended as a demonstration of skill, patience, and the power of quiet determination. Lily's single note, the start of her performance, had transformed not only the audience's perception, but also Ryan's understanding of talent, respect, and humility. Her story became a quiet legend in the community, a reminder that assumptions can be misleading, that talent is often hidden until the right moment, and that true greatness is revealed not through showmanship, but through dedication, heart, and the courage to embrace one's abilities fully. Lily continued to play, teach, and inspire, never seeking the spotlight, never craving recognition. Her music spoke for her, and it was enough. She had reclaimed her voice, her passion, and her confidence, and in doing so, had shown everyone who had doubted her that quiet strength often has the most profound impact. Ryan, now a student and admirer, understood this better than anyone. He had learned to respect, to listen, and to value true skill over appearance. The lessons he carried were not just about music, but about life, about humility, and about the power of recognizing talent where it is least expected. Together, they continued to explore music, creating a bond built on respect, learning, and shared passion. The community thrived from the inspiration Lily provided, and the piano became a symbol of patience, dedication, and the extraordinary potential hidden within those who dare to follow their hearts. Quietly but determinedly, the story of that night, the single note and the talent revealed became a touchstone for anyone who had ever been underestimated. It rem.